HTML5 also includes the IFrame tag. IFrames allow the developer to embed one HTML page within another, much like the older frame and frame set tags do. In addition to this capability, iframes add new attributes and features. For browsers that do not support iframes, plain HTML text can be placed between the open and closing iframe tags, and this text will be displayed to those non-supporting browsers instead of the HTML document that would otherwise be embedded within the parent HTML document. Here's an example of a basic HTML 5.0 iframe. Here we have the opening iframe tag, followed by the attribute source, which specifies the page to load, mad_zelda_fan.html, and then the width and the height. Then we add some text and a closing iframe tag, and if the user browses this page with the browser that does not support iframes, they'll simply see the text, "Sorry, it appears your web browser does not support iframes." Next, here's an example of an iframe that has no border and is used as the target of a hyperlink. In order to create this, first we add the opening iframe tag. We'll specify the width and height and no border by setting frame border to be 0. Finally, we have to give it a name, in this case display window, so that we can later reference it from a hyperlink. Now we'll add some text in case a user browses the page that does not support iframes, and a closing iframe tag. Finally, we have to construct the hyperlink, and in this case we're going to write ahref mad_zelda_fan.html. We're going to specify the target as the iframe with the name display window that we previously coded. Here's an example of some HTML source, in this case with 2 iframes. And I'm going to use NetBeans to highlight so you can see the open and closing iframe tags. Notice we have a width and a height attribute. Frame border is set to 0, so there'll be no border here. Whereas down here, frame border is set to 3, so on the second iframe it will have a visible border. Also, what's important is the name attribute, because this is what you'll include in the anchor tags, the hyperlink or href attribute, and you'll have to reference this to load a page in the iframe. So in this case, display window 1 and display window 2 are important for us to keep in mind. Alright, so with those 2 iframes defined, let's look at how would we get to those iframes. So in this case, we have a hyperlink, and when we click the hyperlink, it's going to target display window 1. And so we're going to load, in this case, j2_html_tables.html into the target display window 1. Well, that's this iframe right here, right? Display window 1. And then here, when we click this hyperlink, it's going to target, in this case, display window 2, which is the name of this iframe. And so it's going to load the web page into this iframe. So now that we've taken a look at the HTML source code, let's load it up in Firefox and see how it looks. Alright, so notice this iframe has a visible border, and this iframe is invisible, it has no border. But when I click the link, watch what happens. Okay, and so it loads the page, videos and all, into this iframe. Okay, and I can play the videos or whatever. Alright, so it's actually embedded within the document. Now I'm going to click on the second link, and it's going to load this page inside of the iframe with the border. And again, here's that page. Next, we're going to look at script tags. HTML script tags allow you to embed other programming languages within an HTML document. In example 1, we're going to embed script programming within the HTML itself. To do this, we'd add open and closing script tags, and we must specify the language. In this case, the most common language embedded within HTML is JavaScript. Then we would go ahead and type our JavaScript code. In this case, we're declaring a variable. We're writing onto the page dynamically the phrase random numbers, and then within a for loop that's going to iterate 20 times, we're going to generate a random number between 1 and 6. So basically, we're rolling the dice 20 times, or a 6-sided dice. Well, all of this code goes in open and closing script tags, and that lets the HTML document know that, at least for that part of the document, it's JavaScript that it needs to interpret and not HTML. In example 2, we're embedding script programming from an external file. And this can be useful for organizing your projects when you have a lot of JavaScript, because you can write your JavaScript code in separate text files and then simply include them with the source attribute. So in other words, you'd write out the script tag in HTML, you would set the language attribute to be JavaScript, and then you would use the source tag to load the page. In this case, we're recursing up one directory and loading menu.js, which is the file extension often given to text files that contain JavaScript. Then we would add the closing script tag. The next example is just like it. A script tag, the language attribute specified as JavaScript, the source recurses up one directory and loads the file validate.js, and then a closing script tag. Again, here's an example of embedding script internally within the HTML. So within the open and closing script tags, we would type the JavaScript code, and in this case we're creating a function in JavaScript that will simply detect the screen size, and then point the user in the right direction based on that and fire off an alert. Note, one of the most common languages used with HTML script tags is JavaScript. They're not the same as Java. JavaScript syntax is similar to its compiled bytecode namesake, and therefore it is both object-oriented and versatile. JavaScript is used for many client-side processing tasks, such as form validation, menu configuration, special effects, and games. JavaScript was created by Brendan Eich while working at Netscape in 1995 under the codename Mocha. It was designed to complement compiled Java development with a non-compiled and interpreted scripting language of similar syntax. JavaScript was initially called LiveScript until after its release with Netscape's 2.0 browser. Afterwards, it was renamed to its current title and has kept that ever since. Microsoft first supported JavaScript with their 3.0 browser and later named their version JScript, referring to HTML and JavaScript documents as DHTML or dynamic HTML when you combine both JavaScript and HTML. JavaScript was standardized in 1996 under the official title EMCA script. Now, we don't have enough time in this video series since it's only a brief introduction and review of HTML, but in another video series we will explore JavaScript in much more detail. Here in this first example we have some HTML document code, and JavaScript is what we're loading here. The language is JavaScript, and you can see the open and closing script tags. And what this tells the web browser is that from this opening script tag all the way up to the top HTML is HTML. And from this closing script tag all the way down to the bottom is HTML. But everything that comes between the open and closing script tags is not HTML. It's JavaScript. And likewise, we could also specify other languages like VBScript, or, there's lots of other languages you can embed inside of HTML. But JavaScript is probably one of the most common ones. So within these script tags, we have, we're declaring a variable in Java. We're going to dynamically write out the phrase 20 random numbers. We have a for loop, so this is going to iterate or loop 20 times. And within that for loop, we're going to generate a random number between 1 and 6. And that will happen, again, 20 times. Now, JavaScript is a comprehensive language, and we'll do a whole nother video series on that as we get the time. So this is just going to kind of be a brief introduction. The focus of these videos is simply on HTML and how would we embed languages in HTML. So I'm going to go through a couple of examples of JavaScript, but if it seems a little bit confusing or a little bit much, don't worry about it, because JavaScript is a whole nother language in and of itself. And right now you just want to kind of keep your focus on HTML. So rather than worrying about the language, even though I'll describe what it does and explain the code a little bit, instead focus on the HTML tags that allow you to use that language, because it could just as easily be some other language. So let's see how that looks, or how it works in Firefox. If I load it up, you can see it generates 20 random numbers. And again, if I reload the page, notice how the numbers change because each time they're random. Let's look at another example. And again, in HTML script tags, or embedded within the HTML document, is some JavaScript. And this does something similar to the last example. It's going to generate a random number between 1 and 6, and it's going to do it 20 times. But I wanted to show you how JavaScript can dynamically write other HTML into the page. And so in this case, it's going to go ahead and create a table. It'll start the table with the caption and then the table row here. And then inside this for loop, as it iterates through the loop, it's going to write out the table cell tags, then close the table row and start another table row. Now it's only going to do the row if modulus 5 is 0, so in multiples of 5. So in other words, it'll do 5 columns across and then add another row, 5 columns across and add another row. And also we have to make sure that it's not at the end, so we have to say I is not equal to 20 and the logical AND. And again, if that seems odd or confusing to you, don't worry about it, because that's a whole nother language that we haven't covered yet. Right now, just worry about the HTML, but I just want to show you how you can embed other languages in HTML with script tags and what they can do. And also, once we get into PHP and active server pages, we'll be doing the same thing. We'll be using PHP to dynamically write out HTML in different circumstances as we process things in the PHP page. And let's see how this looks. And we're going to load it. Pretty much the same as the last example, but now it's putting the random numbers in a table. And I'll reload. You can see a few times. We'll just make some new random numbers. Now, here's an example where we're using script tags, and the language is still JavaScript. But instead of embedding the code directly in the page, we're loading the code from an external file. And we can do that using the source attribute. So in other words, when this page loads, embedded within the head tags are script tags that will then turn around and load the source file u3_javascript_guessNumberScript.js. And .js is the usual extension for an external JavaScript file. And I'll show you what that code looks like. I'll load it up here in NetBeans. And you can see that there's no HTML in this file, it's just all JavaScript. Okay, and this basically just simulates or emulates the rolling of some dice in a craps game. Alright, so we have some variables declared here, globals, and here's a function. And again, if this is confusing or seems odd to you, don't worry about it. Right now you're studying HTML, you're not studying JavaScript. We'll do a series of JavaScript videos later, and we'll examine this in a lot more detail, but we're trying to keep this brief, and I just want you to see how you can embed a language like JavaScript or VBScript or within HTML using script tags. So anyway, here's what the source code looks like. There's the play function, and there's the roll dice function, generates a random number. And this file here, this external file, is being loaded into the HTML document via the script tags here and the source attribute. And that's kind of a neat way to make your code, to organize your code more, and that way you can separate your JavaScript into separate files, and you don't have to, embed it directly within the HTML. I don't know, I guess it's a matter of preference, whatever you like better, but to just see how that looks, it would run the same as if we had embedded it directly in the document. And if I roll the dice, player wins, roll dice to play again. Roll again, roll again, roll again. And it's just firing off message alerts. Player wins, click roll dice to play again. So you can see how that works. Here's another example of an external JavaScript file, or .js file, embedded within HTML using script tags and the source attribute. And it's also going to make use of this paragraph tag here. In this case, the ID is set to message, and we'll use that ID message as an identifier to reference this object where the text is here, welcomes all the fans, from the JS file, from the JavaScript file. So we see the script tags, and now let's take a look at the JavaScript. And again, without going into too much detail here, because this is a whole other topic and subject we'll cover later, we have globals here, we have a start method, and we have a run method here. And this is sort of implementing, threading, and we're going to wait at a specified interval of milliseconds, and we're simply going to change the color of the text, and we're going to change the font size of it so that it will appear to grow and then shrink, grow and then shrink. Okay, so this is the JavaScript code that will be embedded in the HTML document and loaded via these script tags. So let's see what that looks like in Firefox. You can see the font is growing, and then the color changes and the font is shrinking. I'm also changing the font face, but the color changes, font is growing, and the font is shrinking. So you can see I can use JavaScript to do special effects and simple animations and things on a web page. Here's another example, and once again we're loading JavaScript from an external file using our script tags. And what we're going to do is just simply give the user the ability to change the color of the web page to any color they like, just to show you how you can do that with JavaScript. So it loads this file, and let's take a look at the source code real quick. And in the start method, it's just simply going to have a little window pop up, a prompt, and then we'll get a string from them and return it and store it inside selected color. and we'll use document body style background color and change it to whatever color they choose. Alright, and to see how that looks, or how that works, we'll load it in Firefox. When we do, notice this pops up, and for the color that we want, we'll use purple. Notice it just changes the background to purple. Or if I load it again, I'll type red, changes the background to red. Or load it again, green, changes it to green. Cascading Style Sheets. Cascading Style Sheets, or CSS, provide an alternate means of coding the style and presentation of HTML documents. In addition to providing many new features and capabilities that transcend the collection of attributes available through HTML alone, Cascading Style Sheets offer a means of modifying the style and presentation of an entire website by editing only one document. Historically, CSS began as CHSS, or Cascading HTML Style Sheets, which was proposed to the World Wide Web Consortium, or W3C, in 1994 by Hakan William Lai. Working with Birdboss, Lai continued to develop CSS until 1996, when it was finally published in its first Level 1 specification and officially adopted by W3C. Since then, CSS 2.0 was published in 1997, followed by CSS 3.0 in 1998. You may embed CSS code directly within an HTML document. Here's an example. First, we're going to have open and closing style tags, and we'll specify the type as text CSS. Then we're going to add our style code, in this case for an anchor element and a hover. So, for an anchor such as a hyperlink, the color will be lavender, and there will be no underline because we set the text decoration to none. However, when you hold the mouse over the link, the hover color will change from lavender to red, hence the property in the style tag. You may also include an external CSS file in an HTML document with the link tag. The advantage of the above method is that if you include the same style sheet on each page of a website, you need only edit the CSS file, and in so doing, your changes will be reflected throughout the entire site where each HTML page includes the style sheet. The rel attribute defines the relationship the style sheet has with the HTML document. When set to style sheet, the CSS becomes the persistent or preferred style. When set to alternate style sheet, it may be selected by the user as an alternate configuration. Notice that in the link tag, we specify the relationship. The next attribute is href, which is the file name of the Cascading Style Sheet file, usually postfixed with .css, and then of course type, which is text CSS. Here in this HTML document, we're using open and closing style tags to embed a cascading style sheet, or CSS code, directly within the HTML document itself. And so you can see that for the body of the document and also for table cells, these are the attributes that will be set by the cascading style sheet. The font family will be Calibre. We're going to set the scroll bar color. And now the scroll bar, some of these attributes will only work in Internet Explorer and some work in Firefox. And I'll show you that in a moment. Down here, anchor tags will have a text color of lavender, and text decoration is set to none. So although normally a hyperlink is underlined in anchor tags when you use href, it will not be underlined. So that's how we can get rid of the default underline for hyperlinks. Also, we're going to create a mouse over effect by specifying that the hover color is red. So whereas the text color in the anchor tag would be lavender, if we move the mouse over it, the hover color will be red. Alright, so this is embedded directly within the HTML page instead of being loaded from an external CSS file, but it's still CSS code. And let's see how it looks in Firefox. So we can just run that right out of NetBeans, because that's set up as my default browser. And you can notice that when I move my mouse over it, the link changes color. Okay. Now let's see how that looks in Internet Explorer. You also notice that the scroll bars didn't change color there, but on the other hand, if we look at this page in Internet Explorer, notice that the scroll bar is black and the background of the scroll bar has changed color. And of course it has the same mouse over effect. So different browsers may respond differently with cascading style sheets, but you can see some of the attributes of a style sheet embedded directly within an HTML document. In this next example, I'm loading an external cascading style sheet or CSS file. And the way to do that is with the link tag, and you would usually place it inside of the head tags of an HTML document. So within the head tags, open and closing head tags, I have the link tag. And this attribute rel stands for relationship. And there's style sheet and alternate style sheet, but in this case I want it to be a persistent style. So I'm going to specify style sheet. And then basically just like a hyperlink reference, I'm using the href attribute and loading the file v2_css_file.css for cascading style sheet. And of course the type would be text CSS. So when I do that, that's going to turn around and load this file. And it's pretty much just the same code that was in the previous example, except the previous example was embedded in the web page. And here the CSS code is in its own separate file. And the neat thing about this method is that I could turn around and use this link tag and embed this in every single web page on my website. Say I had 100 web pages. And the cool thing is that if I just modify this one file only once, those 100 web pages would all reflect the changes. They would all be updated simply because they're all loading this one cascading style sheet file. So I could change all kinds of things, color and font and different attributes in this one file, and then those 100 web pages would be automatically updated. So using cascading style sheets in this manner as an external file and then loading that external file into a web page with the link tags is a very efficient way of managing large websites. Let's see how that looks in Firefox. And it looks the same, but we'll go ahead and load it and you can look at it anyway. And again, notice how the hyperlink tag changes color. And it also, and here, actually that was one with the external. Let me load this one here. And same. Finally, we have HTML meta tags. Meta tags, though covered last, are actually one of the most important parts of your web pages. They are necessary for your pages to be spidered by the search engines correctly. They include keywords and content so that your pages, once indexed, can be found on the web by these search engines. Here are some examples. In this case, I've included the names for description, keywords, and author, some of the most important meta tags. You would normally place these at the top of your HTML document within the head tags. And after description, you would include content, in this case, whatever your web page is about, and then keywords, which would be keywords that people might type into a search engine. So, for instance, C++, Java, Cisco, Linux, Active Directory, whatever, for pages on my website. And then author, which would be you or whoever's creating the web page. Note, because of this, it is recommended that you carefully code pages with HTML and keywords and use Flash judiciously at the front of a website or on a website's front page if you want your pages to be spidered correctly by the search engines. Websites that are all Flash and have no meta tags don't get promoted well. And here's an example of a typical web page with meta tags. Notice that you normally place them within the open and closing head tags of the HTML document. And of course they would start with the meta tag and the name attribute. Some common ones are description, keywords, and author. And then of course another common attribute is content. So in this case, the description that might show up in a search engine would be programming, networking, tutorials. The keywords, which would be, what would cause this page to appear when different people were looking for it in a search engine, would be C++, Java, Cisco, Linux, Active Directory, and of course the author, Charles Germany. And it looks like I have a funny character there. NetBeans is letting me know the way it's color coded. There you go. Alright, so this kind of gives you an idea of meta tags, but although it's not even a visible part of the web page, very important for getting your web pages indexed in the search engines. The rabbit hole goes much, much deeper, Alice. Remember, you can embed JavaScript and cascading style sheet code within HTML. You can embed JApplets and applets created with Java and Flash SWF files into HTML. You can embed operating-specific scripting languages like VBScript and database SQL within HTML. But these topics are covered in other videos for another place and another time.